Greetings, friends. As always, it's an honor to welcome you back to Rick's Garage. What you see before you today is a 2010 Hyundai Santa Fe all-wheel drive with a 2.4-liter engine. Comes in with the engine light on. Belongs to my sister-in-law. I'm helping her out because she's a widow. She doesn't have much money. So let's see what's going on. Well, friends, it's not good news. It's the dreaded P0711 code. It means we possibly have a faulty temperature sensor in the transmission. Now, to confirm that it is indeed a faulty sensor, I cleared this code, let the engine cool completely down, and then took it for a test drive, and the code came back almost immediately, indicating to me that the fluid did not have time to overheat, so it is a faulty sensor. Well, friends, I haven't worked on very many of these Hyundais. I couldn't find any information on YouTube on how to replace this sensor. I know it's very tight quarters, so it's going to be difficult to film. So I'll try to do the best I can. We're going to learn this job together. The sensor is located under the valve body cover in the front of the transmission. So what we're going to need to do is to remove the valve body cover. It has 19 bolts. Friends, the first thing I want to do is get this under the engine splash guard out of the way. I'm going to have to remove it anyway, but I'm kind of anxious to see what I'm up against. This splash guard is held on by a combination of plastic fasteners and 8mm body panel bolts. A lot of them are missing. There's not much holding this thing on. To remove the plastic fasteners, just unscrew the center screw and then pry them off. To remove the body panel bolts, you'll need a 12mm socket. I'll get the rest of them off camera. As I said, there's not many of them here holding this thing on. Now, after examining the vehicle, it looks to me that some of the bolts will have to get at from the top. This involves removing the battery and the battery tray. Some of the bolts will have to get from the driver's side, peeling back the inner fender, and the rest we can access from the bottom. So let's get started. So before we raise the vehicle, let's get everything done that we can from the top. The first thing we're going to do is to remove this fresh air intake by pulling these little plastic fasteners. Okay, next we're going to disconnect the battery terminals. Always remove your negative terminal first. The reason for that is you don't want to accidentally ground out the positive terminal on some metal part of the car. I'll get the other terminal off camera. Now we're going to unbolt the hold down. You'll need a 12mm socket for that. And then we'll go ahead and pull the battery out. To remove the battery tray, you'll first need a 10mm socket. For all the rest of the bolts, you'll need a 12mm socket. Little bracket on there that I'm going to remove this radiator hose to get that out of the way. I'm not going to drain the coolant. The petcock is kind of hard to get at. And where we're up near the top of the motor, we're not going to lose very much. Okay. See what happens here. I'm going to install this stopper just to prevent it from continuously dripping while we're trying to work. I'm also going to get this fill tube hose out of the way. I've got a special hose type pliers to twist it so we can get it off. Okay, now we can start removing the cover bolts that we're able to get at from the top. I've already got most of them off. I didn't show that because it was kind of a bad camera angle. I'm going to show you the last two here. A magnet comes in handy on this job. Under this shift mechanism, there are two bolts that are hidden, but they're fairly easy to find and get on them with your socket. Now that I've got everything that I could do from the top done, I went ahead and raised the vehicle. I've got the vehicle supported on 3 wheels with my lift stands from My Lift Stands Incorporated, and the one wheel that had to be removed, that corner of the vehicle is being supported by one of my Torin Big Red jack stands. And I've got the tire in the front, just in case I have to go up top and do something else, I can stand on that tire. Next, I'm going to remove this plastic access panel. There are 3 12mm bolts that are holding it in place. Now you've got 4 plastic fasteners to remove so you can peel back the inner fender. 2 up top and 2 I've already removed down at the bottom. Then you can find something to tie off the inner fender to keep it out of your way. As you can see, we now have real good access to all the cover bolts on the driver's side. Without removing those panels, we never would have got them off. With this video already getting a lot longer than I had intended, I'm going to go ahead and remove one and then remove the others off camera. Friends, as it turned out, I did not have enough room to get that lower corner bolt out with the air ratchet. For that, I had to use a flex head 1/4" drive ratchet. Before I attempt to remove the lower cover bolts, I'm going to go ahead and drain the transmission fluid. Here you see a nice clean container that I'm going to use for that. The reason for this is I'm going to pour the old transmission fluid back in. This vehicle has 150,000 miles on it, and we have no record as to whether that fluid has ever been changed. Any mechanic will tell you that if you attempt to change the transmission fluid in a vehicle with high mileage and the transmission fluid had never previously been changed, it's a death knell for the transmission. That was a 24mm wrench, by the way, that I used to loosen the drain plug. Now we can get all the rest of the cover bolts from underneath. As I've been doing throughout the video to save time, I'll get the rest of them off camera. Well friends, I've made a pretty bad mess of things. What I was trying to do was tap it with a rubber hammer, create a little gap, and then get a screwdriver in there to force the cover off. And I wound up getting oil all over my camera. You can't see a thing. So I'm going to finish getting this cover separated, and I'm going to leave it right there and let it drip out overnight. Friends, it's the next morning. All the oil is dripped out. I've been trying to find a way to get this cover off of the valve body. Can't get it out through the bottom, can't get it out through the side. And I finally come up with a way. So what you've got to do is pull it straight up and pivot it in front of the radiator, and then grab it from the bottom and pivot it straight up and out. Okay friends, here you see the sensor we're trying to replace. It's going to be a lot easier to unplug it while it's still bolted in. The harness just sort of snaps in. Just grab it firmly and pull it straight out and it'll snap out. Now with the harness free from the sensor, we can go ahead and unbolt the sensor. Friends, I'm going to likely get hammered for this big time in the comment section. I'm going to inspect the harness, and if it looks good, I'm not going to replace it. The reason for this is my sister-in-law, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't have a lot of money. The wiring harness would cost her another $150 that she does not have. And where I'm not charging her anything for labor, I'm going to take the chance and just replace the sensor. As I said, as long as her harness looks good, which it appears to be in pretty good shape. Now for those of you who decide to go ahead and replace the harness, there are videos on YouTube showing how to do that, so I refer you to one of those. You have to remove the valve body and the upper shift mechanism. And now just snap the harness plug back in. And we're ready to reinstall the cover. Friends, I'm ready to reinstall this cover. It's very apparent that it had been previously removed, and whoever reinstalled it used some sort of gasket maker material. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use Permatex Ultra Black. It's oil resistant and heat resistant, and I think it'll do a good job in resealing this cover. Now I'm going to go ahead and install it off camera. You saw me remove it, and you don't really need to see me put it back in the effort to make this video a little shorter. However, I will mention this. When I was removing the cover, you saw me use a couple of different air ratchets and a battery operated ratchet. Don't use those to get these bolts started. There are 19 of these bolts. Start every single one of them by hand. The reason being is this is an aluminum housing that we're screwing into, and it'd be very easy to cross thread these bolts. So go ahead and put them in by hand, and then once they're all started, then if you want to use your air ratchet, have at it. So I'll come back when I get this installed and we'll be ready to put the transmission fluid back in. Friends, what I'm doing now is opening the fill tube. Put the cover aside from now. Be careful not to lose the gasket. Now I'm opening up this vent a little bit. You've got to allow the air to escape while you fill the transmission. The transmission is pretty well airtight, and if you don't do this, you won't be able to get the fluid in. Now keep in mind, I'm going to be pouring the old transmission fluid back in. I explained why I'm doing that previously. So what I've done is I've taken a paint strainer and put it inside my funnel in case there's any debris that happened to fall into that fluid as I drained it. Now I'm going to pour it in nice and slow. I'm going to finish pouring this in off camera. It'll take a while. Now friends, I'm going to button up this inner fender, replace the access panel, put the wheel back on, and lower the car off the stands. I'll do all that off camera as well. Okay friends, we're back up top. We're going to try to make short work of putting this back together. First, we're going to reconnect the overflow tube to the filler neck. Don't forget to put the clamp back on. Next, we're going to go ahead and reconnect the radiator hose, and again, don't forget to clamp. Next, we're going to slip the battery tray back in. Install that exactly the same way you removed it. Now we can go ahead and lower the battery back into place. Don't forget to secure it with the battery hold down. Now we can go ahead and connect up the battery terminals. Now, as you recall, when we removed the battery, I had you disconnect the negative terminal first. Now that we're installing the battery, we're going to do just the opposite. We're going to connect the positive battery terminal first. Now we can go ahead and top off the radiator. As you recall, when we removed that radiator hose, we lost a little bit of the coolant. Just to prevent having to respond to a bunch of comments, some of you may have noticed I'm wearing a hospital bracelet. I did not realize I still had it on until I was editing the video. Yes, I was in the hospital yesterday. I was released this morning. I'm supposed to be home bed resting. Guess what? I'm not. Friends, I've gone ahead and brought the vehicle inside the garage. It's time to top off the transmission fluid. Now, you see I have the vehicle raised. I'm using my lift stands from Lift Stands Incorporated. This gives us the ability to raise the vehicle and also keep it level. We need to have it level to check the transmission fluid. This vehicle is not equipped with a transmission dipstick. It has what is called an inspection port. This vehicle is a 2010 model year. The valve body cover is made out of steel, and it has a plug that can be opened with a 22mm wrench. The newer vehicles, 2011 and newer, the valve body cover is made out of plastic, and it has a 3/8 square to accept a regular 3/8 ratchet to open the plug, as you see here. There's one thing I want to be very clear on before we go any further. Do not open this inspection port unless the engine is running. I repeat, the engine must be running. If you open this inspection port with the engine off, all the transmission fluid is going to drain back into the pan, and when you open this inspection port, it's going to come gushing out. The procedure for filling and checking this transmission fluid is as follows. After pouring the initial amount of transmission fluid in, about 4 quarts or so, start the motor with the car in park. Hook up your live data scan tool if you have one. Let the car idle while you put it through the gears: drive, park, reverse, drive, park, neutral. Do that several times. When the transmission reaches its normal operating temperature, somewhere between 122 and 140 degrees, then you can open the inspection port. If nothing comes out, you need more transmission fluid. Keep adding until it starts to dribble out. If it comes gushing out, then you've got too much. Once it's dribbling out, you can close up the inspection port and you're done. Now, if you do not have a scan tool that can read live data, don't panic, it's okay. Most of us do-it-yourselfers don't have such tools. Start the engine, run it up to full operating temperature. Now, because the engine is at operating temperature does not mean that the transmission is at operating temperature. So once you've got the motor running at operating temperature, let it idle for another 20 minutes or so, and that should be pretty close to where you need to be to check the transmission fluid. With the battery installed, you do not have direct access to the transmission fill tube. You're going to need a funnel like the one you see here with a long, flexible tube. Friends, I've got the engine running. It's been running for about 20 minutes since I got to full operating temperature. I ran it through the gears a few more times. As you can see, I've already removed the inspection plug. I've got the transmission fluid at 130 degrees, and as you can see, there's nothing coming out. That means we need to add. So I'm going to slowly start pouring in transmission fluid until it starts to dribble out. Okay, now that we got the transmission fluid dribbling out, I'm going to go ahead and replace the plug. All that will remain is to replace the filler plug and snap the fresh air intake back in place, and the job is done. Okay friends, I've already returned the car to the owner. The job was a complete success. She's had the car for a couple of weeks now. That transmission code never came back. What you see here is the splash guard that I removed early on in the project. I did not put it back on because I wanted to order new fasteners for it. As you recall, some of the fasteners were missing. And also, I wanted the opportunity to check the transmission for leaks. So she's going to be returning it in the days to come, and I'm going to be putting this back on for her. Altogether, the job cost her about $60. It was $32 for the sensor. She had to pay for some transmission fluid and these new fasteners that cost about $8. So she's very, very happy. I saved her a ton of money. So it looks like that's all I've got, friends. I want to thank you once again for watching Rick's Garage. Before I go, I will post 2 videos to your left, I hope of which you'll find of interest. And to your right, as always, will be a picture of my avatar in the form of my very trusty German Shepherd. By all means, feel free to click on that should you wish to subscribe to my channel. So thanks again for watching. We hope to see you all very, very soon.